Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamara Nambiar, and I will be introducing Deepika Padukone. As a celebrity, the choices she made every day were subjected to public controversy and criticism. Nonetheless, she always managed to stay strong and poised. Her formula was be authentic, be yourself. Deepika, I have a few questions for you. When I grew up, I wanted to become an artist, a scientist, and a singer. When I read your story, you were a great badminton player but chose to become an actor. How did you choose from an actor and a badminton player?
You know, the same way that you want to be an artist and a scientist? How do you feel? You can achieve both, right? You feel like if you set your heart on something, you can do that. And then you want to do something else and you can do that too. So honestly, when I was growing up, even before I realized, I started playing professional badminton. But it's when I was a teenager, I realized that maybe this is not something that I want to continue and pursue and play professionally. And every time I watched a movie, somehow I felt like that's where I belonged. So it's my gut that told me that I wanted to transition from being an athlete to being an actor. And then I followed my gut. You know what gut is? Like your instinct, like that voice inside you that tells you what is right and what is wrong. That.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How are you?
Thanks, full disclosure, that's my daughter, and that's the longest she's listened to anyone. Can you guys hear me? You guys have said no, it's a good thing. Okay, let me try. Living. Henrietta Living.
The one with the genome that was supposed to cure something.
Close. She was an astrophysicist. Slightly different stream, but
There you go.
getting there.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing.
We can combine this by the end of the evening. So the story of Henrietta Living is a remarkable one for the simple reason that most folks don't know who she is. And her contribution to the world and the universe is remarkable. So here's what she did. Henrietta Living in the late 1800s was hired by Dr. Pickering at Harvard. And there was a team of 80 women that he put together. And they were known as the human computer. And what these people did was fascinating. They looked at photographic evidence of what's called Cepheid stars. So they just stared up in the sky, looked at stars, kept plotting it on a piece of glass year after year after year for at least 11 years from what I remember. And then these women literally computed manually by hand the rate of the flicker, extrapolated it to the movement of the stars, and that led to Hubble looking at these things together, and he said, wait a minute, over the last 20 years, these stars have moved apart, which means that the universe is expanding. And the inverse of that is that if it's expanding, and if you contract it, it all started with a bang. That led to the Big Bang. And this was 80 women who worked on this, got zero credit, and the fact that nobody here can name any of them is testimony to the fact that women don't get as much credit as they probably do. I'm going to make the story a little worse. The nickname for these women was Pickering's harem. Dr. Pickering is the guy who picked them, but these women were known as Pickering's harem. So on that note, in your own streams, clearly I'm sure you've dealt with issues where you've been looked down or up purely on account of your gender. Right? I would love to hear your stories of what you had to go through, and it would be great if you can have one personal anecdote of a gender bias, and how do you fight it? It's one thing to read about this in the newspapers, but what would be remarkable is if there's something you can touch upon at a personal level that we can relate to. Any order.
Okay.
Um, I don't think necessarily that it's always connected, always connected with your profession. There are some issues that women have and will always have. And I think we have to not accept it, but be proud of it, live with it, see how we can work with it. And in 2000, I organized a conference for women in architecture. And 10 years before that, I had tried to organize one when I said I wanted women's work to have an exhibition, but it should be their work. It should not be women who had worked with their fathers or their brothers or their husbands, because that's what happens in architecture. The women always pushed back. And I didn't get any response. But 10 years later, in 2000, when I sent out the same thing, but I made one difference. I said, even if you work with your father, brother, or husband, if the work is yours, you can participate and take part in this exhibition. And things had changed hugely. So change is always happening. And I always look at it as a celebration and not to make excuses. I've been working now 40 years, and I never thought that I'm in a man's profession all the time or that it's a struggle. I think one accepted certain issues and worked within those constraints, because we have advantages too. It's not that we don't have advantages being women, but I know it's not easy. But I do want to say one thing that bothered me. I was on a committee in Delhi, in the Paryavaran Bhavan, which is the Ministry of Environment, and I was on that committee. And I had to fly to Delhi and reach the Paryavaran Bhavan before 10 o'clock and get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to catch the flight. And I would reach there and I would ask, well, where's the women's toilet? And there wasn't a single toilet in that whole building, except in one corner there was a filthy toilet which was locked up. So this indifference to women's needs is not just at a high level, it works right down. A few years later, I had studied at Smith College and I got a doctorate there. And one of the other women who was given an honorary doctorate was the first woman at the American Stock Exchange in New York. And she said when she began work, there wasn't even a toilet in the entire building for women. And she had to go out of the building and go to the next building. So there are many, many issues that we have to overcome. But we're strong. And I think if we love what we do with a passion, we keep our integrity and our value systems intact, we will shine always.
Well, mine is physical field. So it's a field where I need to prove my prowess, my skills, to convince my male commandos, the trainees, that I can train you. So whether it is shooting with an AK-47 and hitting the bullseye in one swift movement, or whether it's boxing and wrestling with them and getting straight away onto the ground. So this has always been the kind of work that I do. So I think in this I've always had to keep my skills honed up. And like I said, it was a physically demanding thing, so I had to keep myself always, completely fit and being able to do anything. So that's how it worked with me. And, training commandos are extremely elite. They're very good, they're the best. So it's very obvious that when I would go to train them, there would not be any underestimation that I would have. And once I was able to prove myself to them, then, it was quite easy after that. So I also think that men and women, we talk a lot about, empowering women and all that. That's perfectly fine. But I also think that men and women can work together. They don't have to be adversaries, but they can wonderfully work with each other, because each of the two sexes has their own positives. Like if the concept of yin and yang, okay, if you think of woman, she's yin in the sense that she is adaptable, she is understanding, she has all the softer qualities. And a man is aggressive, and he has drive. So these are the male qualities, the yang qualities. But every woman should also develop some yang, and every man should also have some yin. And primarily, if both work together, then each one's yin and yang works together. So I think they can succeed more easily.
Well, I had it very tough. I'm not going to say, fight shy of saying that. It all started when I was 7 years old and I was learning vocal classical music. I believe your question is about what I faced, right? Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I was learning vocal classical music, and tabla was something, when I was singing, the rhythmic aspect came as if naturally to me. So people said, I think you're rhythmically inclined, so why didn't you learn tabla? My brother was learning tabla, and when I requested his teacher to teach me, he said, "Tum to ladki ho, tumse nahi hoga." Straight away. So I said, but give me a chance, thoda sa main koshish to karu. Ye ladkiyon ka kaam nahi hai, tum to abla ho. I remember the word. Abla is a helpless person. So I persisted, I just asked my brother for a few tips, and I started learning on my own. And accidentally, the teacher came home early one day, and he heard me playing, and he said, "Kahan se seekha?" I said, "Aapne mana kar diya, maine bhai se pooch ke thoda bahut kar liya." So then he started teaching me. So that was the beginning. Then when I started performing when I was 10 years old, it first hit everybody that who is this person, a total rank outsider, not from a musician family, a girl in a male-dominated field, how dare she comes. And I remember one of the television shows, some person asked me, "Aapne is field mein aane ki gustaki kaise ki?" This was the academy, and when he went on the stage, and I followed him with the tabla, carrying the tabla. And I sat, so people thought, okay, I'm some assistant, and the tabla player's coming from behind. I'm just...
I've been told that folks have to leave, so we'll just come back to you in a second. But great insights. Let's hear your stories, just continuing that same line of thought. If there is one.
Actually, I've been thinking about it. I'm like, great, I have like some time to think about my, moment or like an incident. But to be very honest, other than professionally, and even professionally, it's literally like maybe like one or two things like pay scale. Other than that, I have to say that I've never really experienced it. But maybe now when I think about it, maybe it's the way that I was brought up. It never sort of, I didn't look at it through that lens ever. So maybe there have been instances where I have faced that sort of discrimination of male versus female, girl, boy. But maybe I just didn't register it because that's not the way. I've grown up in a family, there's just me and my sister, we're two girls. And we were never made to feel like we cannot accomplish something because we're girls. I started playing badminton at a very young age. Girls and boys traveled together, we played together, we stayed in dormitories together. We had the same issues of like not having toilets or not having, water to shower. So the issues in that sense have been the same. Again, maybe if I think of it, maybe the prize money that the guys got was a little more than what the girls get. Today in film, there's no lack of opportunity. Sure, in the kind of films that we've made, maybe say a couple of years ago, and the place of a woman in a film versus how those roles have changed today are very different. And of course the pay, which is again something that, I'd like to speak for myself and say that for myself, I think I've been able to bridge that gap in terms of what my male contemporaries are getting versus what I'm getting paid. There was a recent incident where a director offered us a film and said, creatively I liked it. And then it came to sort of talking about the monies, and I said, okay, so this is what I would charge. And it kind of went back and forth, where he came back and said, actually, we won't be able to afford this because we have to accommodate the male, So I said, okay, then tata, goodbye, because I know my track record, I know what I'm worth. I know that his films haven't been doing as well as my films have been doing. So it made absolutely no sense. So I was okay to say no to that film based on that one thing, because I just thought it was unfair. And I'm ready today to take those steps or measures or decisions for myself, because I'm going to be able to sleep peacefully at night. I don't think I'd be able to live with that sort of thought, knowing that I've been a part of a film, had the same sort of creative contribution, or bringing the same sort of value to a film, but being underpaid. I was not okay with that. So I think some of those instances, but I think broadly, I've never been made to feel less or not being able to achieve something because of being a woman.
If I may just say one thing here, since Deepika said that, we did a survey of women and successful women. And I also have just one sister, we're just two girls in the family. And strangely enough, they found where there were only daughters, the confidence level was different than when there were sons as well in those families, at least maybe a generation before. So that's interesting.
That's a great insight. Before we go to Aditi, there's a beautiful research. There's a beautiful research by Gina Davis about I forget what the technical term is, the extras in the movie. Over a span of about 800 Hollywood films, turns out that 90% of the background extras are male. So to your point of subconscious conditioning as to what one sees on screen and what goes on literally in the background. I thought it was a remarkable statistic which just goes unnoticed. What about you, Aditi?
मैं बताती हूँ discrimination के बारे में. Friends, it is so annoying. No, I tell you, I think it ties in with the, yes. It ties in with what we are sitting here today for, is that stand-up comedy to a very large extent is storytelling, is telling the truth about your life and telling sometimes an exaggerated truth about your life. And I realized that, when it came to lineups and stuff, people would be like, oh my God, you're really funny for a woman. I was like, yeah. But it makes you realize that women have to work triply hard for someone to be interested in their story. Like, I know that, like, a fellow comic once came and told me, तेरे को पता है ना, तेरे set में सब सुट्टा मारने जाते हैं. And I was like, really? What do I have to do? What do I have to do to follow up that guy before me who did like a round of terrible jokes, which everyone was like, हाँ, सच्ची, correct, औरत बहुत time लगाती कपड़े पहनने में. So correct, this man is telling some real truths of life out here. And then you go on stage and you're definitely saying things that people have never heard before. And actually, that was one of the reasons I got into stand-up, was because I was like, I can't identify a narrative of where the woman is funny and not hideous. Like, otherwise they would be like, arey, wo ai, pon, 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 pon. And I was like, kyun? Why can't we be owners of our own stories, and why can't we take the center stage not as an object of attraction? I know that, like, corporate gigs, I still get like, arey, female comedian, shakal kaisi hai? I was like, koi nahi pooch raha jokes kaise? Koi nahi pooch raha. And then honestly, I mean, I would like to say, Deepika, that I would have totally been like a Deepika Padukone myself. But I like to eat.
Me too. Oops, I shouldn't be saying me too, but I just asked for samosas and they had none.
I will see you backstage by the snack plate.
With the chutney, mixing with the sweet chutney. Yeah.
Where is this? Should they just bring these on? No, anyway. ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं.
Let's flip it around so that Deepika doesn't get enough time to think this time. And we'll keep it.
I'm very curious to see what these little chits are.
By the way, you guys are being judged. These are on a score of 1 to 10.
Is your wife saying you're terribly boring? Like,
That I'm very used to. Yeah. The secret to my marriage's success, which is 17 years, by
just
the way.
say yes.
Yeah, exactly. Just say yes. Great
You know,
conversationalist.
this mantra that all you men think like works. It's not a secret
my
anymore.
parents had the solution for this. My mom and dad are somewhere here. And I remember once I heard them argue when I was 10 or 12. And dad told my mom that, hey, listen, we're going to solve all the big problems. You guys can solve all the small issues, right? All the fiscal issues, the monetary issues, kids, tuition, education, etc. So my mom asked him, what the hell are you going to solve? And he said, well, us guys will get together and solve the Arab-Israeli conflict, the cure to cancer, which is what men do. Get together, have a couple of beers, talk philosophy. It's the Parisian attitude. You guys do the heavy lifting and get paid less, clearly. Yeah. Well, let's flip it around. So one of my favorite comedians, Chris Rock, made this comment that we live in a time and age.
I thought he was going to say you.
Yeah, I know. I was going to be like,
but
"Kaun
after
aurat? This me.
After this, you might bump it up a notch and get up to being
Oh my
favorite,
God!
yeah.
So work here also.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
and no
impress
pay.
me.
So Chris Rock said, we live in a time and age where everything is so politically sensitive that the gig for a stand-up comedian is borderline pushing the envelope between the last bastion of free speech, right, and maintaining that professional ethic. And I can clearly see how lines can get blurred and things get taken out of context, etc. What's your stance on this, being in the profession?
You know, I think actually political correctness is not the biggest danger to comedy. I think that, in fact, we have lived in a world where easy laughs have been derived from too much cruelty. And the fact that we are pushing back, the fact that the world is pushing back and saying this is not okay, that you can't, like if you're hurting somebody, you're perpetuating a very harmful stereotype, be better. And I mean, of course, we're all going to make mistakes on the way. We're all going to do terrible things. And I have said several and done several politically incorrect things that I sorely regret right now. But having said that, the push towards political correctness as the bastion of free speech, I really don't think it's a problem. And the truth is that because a lot of the narrative has been largely male, a lot of the narrative has been कि औरत को time लगता है कपड़े पहनने में, उसको driving नहीं आता है, oh no, wow. I'm like, in Saudi Arabia, women are not allowed to drive. So give us some time. Nobody's like, अरे मर्दों को साड़ी नहीं पहननी आती. Give them some time to learn. So it's sort of, I think that, in fact, if anything, not maybe curtailing voices, but giving mics or giving stories to people whose stories have not been heard before is going to actually lead us to a more inclusive and empathetic world. And women will actually feel, because I mean, I don't know, maybe women are more, somebody told me this recently, ki Aditi, yaar, sometimes you're a lot more cruel in real life than you are on stage. And I was like, you know what, it's true, because I feel terrified to sometimes say some really, really cruel, funny things, which I know my male friends will gas off with confidence and someone's throw money at them or whatever. But so I think that when you hear more empathetic stories, when you hear more kind and more inclusive stories, you just have a more empathetic, inclusive and kind world.
Thanks for that. Deepika's got to run after this. We'll continue the panel, but let me pose a question to you. And a fellow venture capitalist recently wrote about, I don't know if you guys have read this article, about the return of investment on any movie that has been made in 2018 over a budget of 50 crores. Have you read about this? It's fascinating. So every movie, this is the last question for Deepika. I'm getting all these cues. In 2018, all the movies...
Are we under attack or something?
Yeah, I know. Now you know what I feel like.
Samosa taiyar hai.
So all movies made over a budget of 50 crores. Over. In 2018. There are many data points that were remarkable, including the extremely poor ROI on all movies made by the Khans, but leave that aside. I had to slip it in there. The top 5 movies, purely in terms of return on investments, of the top 5, 4 have been women-centric themes. That's saying something. And do you think this trend will continue, being in the industry? And I think it's pretty awesome that someone ran this analysis.
So,
Just to give you numbers, so the return on investments on real estate in India was about 7%. The Cannes returned 9%. Women-centric movies, the top 4 out of the 10, or the 5, sorry, returned well north of 25%. Yeah, which is remarkable. Be happy to share this link with you guys, but what do you think of this?
I think it's amazing, and I think, look, I think it's nice for us to say women-centric or female-centric at a moment like this when we're talking about female role models. Having said that, when it comes to creativity, we need to look beyond female or male. It's about the film. If the film didn't work, it's okay. It's a different thing that the films that the Khans didn't work. But say there was a film like Andhadhun that was led by Ayushmann. So I think that it really boils down to the script itself. But yes, I see a trend, which is films that, you're right, films that are being led by women are doing much better. Also, we're in a place today where directors are changing roles, and that's unheard of. You have, if you have a script that sort of has a male protagonist, and suddenly directors are like, 1 second, let me just flip that, let me just make that a female protagonist, and then go to so-and-so with the film. So you hear of a film that was offered to a male actor like 2-3 years ago, and it's coming back to you now with a female protagonist, is a huge achievement, But as a creative person, I would not like to make this distinction of male-led and female-led and all of that. I would just say that I think great content is what is really working right now. And I think a lot of that has to go to the audience. They're ready for that. I don't think it matters today anymore who is in the movie. It really depends on the kind of story that's being told, how well the director's telling that story, so there's a lot of these factors also, I think, that are playing a very, very important role in, in the success of these films. It's not, I don't think you can blindly say, okay, so-and-so's in the film, so let's go and watch it. I think 2018 was a clear sort of,
Watershed year.
On that, so you have to sort of, right from the promo, the posters, all of that, I think that the audience has that pulse. I think they know instantly from the minute that first trailer goes out, they know at that very moment whether they want to watch that film or not. Of course, there are films that may not be sort of trending right from the start, but then they release on that weekend and there's that word of mouth that sort of, helps elevate the film. But yes, I think gone are the days when you just had like a big star on a film poster and that film worked. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if you're going to, are you going to kidnap her? Yeah, you're going to kidnap Deepika?
I
Okay.
don't need my samosas.
So we're going to unveil the book at this point before Deepika leaves, and then get back to the panel. So let's have you guys steal the show. I'm going to step away for a second.